And if I could just make one more comment, and I think it's being pointed, you can sit down, Dane, I'm sorry. We have in our documents, we have not looked at user fees for 14 years, or 11 years, whatever, a significant period of time. And we're going to have other public hearings tonight in terms of fees. And I think what we're hearing tonight, we'll probably hear in the other public hearings. And what this tells me is that we need to do a better job of building in some inflationary factors. We need to have some ways to raise fees without us having to go through this long and arduous process. And I'm not trying to cut out the public's input or anything like that. But if we had incremental fees, as we've discussed, and that are shown somewhere in here, looking at adding more of those, I think we could do that. So, we need to continue to look at this on an annual basis and bring it back for annual updates. Before I get to you, Mr. Bernheim, let me just make sure somebody else that hasn't has spoken. And then, okay, so I'll go with Mr. Scholl, followed by Mr. Bernheim.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'd like to stress that my thinking on this is not a situation where you have to approve everything right now. This is a complex document, a lot of concerns. Mr. Bernheim and Mr. Besnay both brought up important points. One of the key things that we were concerned about, as Mr. Besnay pointed out, is all the delays and all the little piddly things that discourage business. I'd like to suggest that you ask the members of the public who now have the document to take a look at it, cost out the things where they might have objections, and then let the committee review it again. I'd be willing to spend time on that. And then you as the council should realize that anything that we present is simply three people who've debated the issue and looked at things and so on. You should look at the documents also and see where you think there should be adjustments. As I said, you're not going to insult us if you say, we think this is nuts, it's too high. We do have to take the economic situation into account and our competition with other cities. But we do have to make sure that the city is not losing a tremendous amount of money for major developments that can afford to pay their way. And I think that was a key concern of the committee also. So, as I say, I'd be willing to look at it some more with the other committee members, and that's what I would hope you would do. Just refer it back to us and ask all of these people to present Janet Coster their concerns and their cost factors and their recommendations. So you get, at a lot of public hearings, it's cut and dry. We'll hear the public, but with the decisions already been made. I'd like to see you take a different tack that now it's been presented, now people see what it is, now they give their presentation, now let's take it back and take that all into concern and then make a final decision.
Thank you, Mr. Scholl. And I said thank you, Mr. Scholl. We'll conclude with Mr. Bernheim.
2 points. One, I don't know what the impact is. The milk farm went through a bankruptcy. Is now owned, the milk farm, little parcel, is owned by a financial group. So I would say it's not going to be developed for a while till it gets owned by developers. And that's some evidence. And with all due respect, Jack, I don't think anybody in the audience has any problem, given that the inflation was 53%, and I provided that information to the city manager. She never wrote back and said I had it wrong or anything. Pass a motion that raises the certain fees by 55%. You have to understand that a number of these fees already have an inflation factor. You base it on how much the engineering cost of construction is. That builds in the inflation. So it's not as if your entire fee structure doesn't have some of that built into it. I don't think that's the problem. That's one way that you get this argument about inflation, because people say, well, we haven't done anything for 11 years. Well, you look at the CPI and you see what it is. Now, maybe it is that city staff has grown much more than the CPI or wages at the city have gone. But I just don't care for that argument, that, well, it's been a long time, so let's jump in and not worry about it. You can take that number, it's a public number, pass that motion. You're not going to get any objection. I don't think anybody here has not had, hopefully, some raise in that period or understands that things are more expensive, but it's not a good argument for convincing someone who's in business that you can just now willy-nilly 600% increase and don't worry about it. But that's what I would propose that you do tonight, is add that inflation factor in, and then let's deal with, if you think there's actual costs, and I go back with this group that says, let's simplify the procedures at the city if we need to. Maybe we're wasting time at the city, and it shouldn't take, as I understand, the hourly figure at the city is $47 an hour, or something like that I saw in some of the figures. How many hours should it take to review a sign? And as you remember from my letter, you don't generally get a better plan because you send it to the city and they review it. You get a somewhat different plan, or you don't get a better sign. So it's not perceived by people coming to the city that the city is doing work for them at some cheap rate. It's in some ways seen as a burden, but
Okay.
that's for another day.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bernheim. Now, I've gone around the room, people have spoken twice, no new people have asked to speak. So, seeing that, I'll now close the public hearing and bring it back up to council. It's in your hands, council.
Well, to begin with, I think there's a lot to be said about some of these increases. I think I disagree with the cost for renting this facility for the public good. I don't see any necessity to charge people who have a meeting that's going to benefit the city $100 to accomplish that meeting. I don't see that that's good. I do know that the committee worked hard to come up with some ideas and I think that's where we're at. I think this is not something that we can just say magic potion here and wave our hands and go forward. I do think that we probably need to look at this with a little more of a jaundiced eye, taking into consideration we've had a public hearing, we've now had two, this will be the second one, where people have raised concerns. Some of those concerns were met. We have a committee that went out and reviewed this, and I agree with Mr. Scholl, who is on that committee, that maybe some of these elements that came out tonight might be considered. We also heard from our citizen groups that represent business, and they too feel like we are maybe rushing to judgment here. And I realize the city wants to improve the fees. I know that we have budget constraints and needs, but I do believe that we're not ready to pass this thing, at least I'm not ready to pass this thing at this point, based on what I've heard tonight and based on some of the problems that people have presented. I do think we're close. I hope we're closer than the people at the state in doing their budget. But I do think we're close. I think we've heard a lot of information. I think we're getting cooperation from our community, and I think we ought to press that a little more and figure out if other people have interest. They ought to get a hold of Mr. Scholl and sit down with him and come up with some better ideas. But this is a starting point, and you have to start somewhere. People are going to be upset if you don't, if you just carte blanche deal this thing. And that's why we had this meeting tonight.
Okay.